Next agenda item, 8.4, the forthcoming review of intertidal shellfish management measures by Fisheries New Zealand. I'm happy to move this. I've added a clause as well, which we can talk about after Dave's gone through. But just to be clear, this was supposed to come to us, and Dave will go through this last year. But when the Rahui was applied for, essentially to avoid confusion, Fisheries moved this overall review that's been asked by the Council and the Hauraki Gulf Forum in the past to sometime early this year. We think it's April. I thought it would be good with all the focus on this issue if myself and Councillor Ferry asked if this could come to at least discuss, ask some questions, help our communities understand where we're heading. But we don't obviously know all the details of what will be proposed by Fisheries in the first instance. So just to be clear, this is a decision to kind of approve direction for staff to start working on all the controls across the Auckland region and work towards a submission of what we think Fisheries New Zealand might come on. So it's a bit of a strange one, but I thought it'd be good to come because a lot of people had been asking questions. Councillors had been wondering what our position was. So Dave.
Thank you, Chair. And again, just to note that this is something that Fisheries New Zealand have been working on for some time. It was actually an objective that was included in the Hauraki Gulf Fisheries Plan back in August 23 that they wanted to review intertidal shellfish management measures. And so basically they were looking to get a proposal out by the end of 2025. But of course the temporary closure proposal by Ngāti Manihiri came along, and just to avoid confusion about what's proposed with this set of measures, if I can get the slides, there we go, slides to work, then we can just sort of provide an introduction to this particular report. So firstly, the intent of this report is simply to get your agreement for council staff to do a submission. We're looking to probably bring that to a committee about April, May, depending on when central government release it. We have got an indication that it is before April that these proposals will come out. So I just wanted to give some context for this. Fisheries New Zealand obviously administers the Fisheries Act 1996. Their responsibility or the purpose of that act is to ensure that fisheries are available for use while ensuring sustainability. And then that's for all fisheries across New Zealand, and of course that spans deep water fisheries all the way through to freshwater and everything in between. Intertidal shellfish has been quite a topical issue in the Auckland, Coromandel, Northland regions for some time, and particularly since about the 1980s. And that reflects the fact that a broader range of shellfish species were started to be harvested in the late 1980s, and that reflected a broader socio-economic demographic who were interested in harvesting other species available to them. And so in the past, historically, Fisheries New Zealand has set harvest limits for very commonly used species, traditionally harvested: cockles, pippies, rock lobsters, scallops, mussels, those sorts of things. That's not the focus of this review coming up. The focus is on what we call all other category shellfish species. And all other category species include, and the definition of shellfish is very broad under the Fisheries Act. It includes things that you would traditionally not refer to as shellfish in a common day-to-day perspective. But effectively, it's focusing on the species that are typically seen on the hard shore, the reefs, the rock pools, that sort of thing. So periwinkles, whelks, cat's eyes, those sorts of things, starfish, they're all part of the shellfish definition. And so those are the things that are going to be subject to the review coming along in about April. I spent several decades with MAF fisheries back in the day, so I kind of know these things back to front in terms of these management measures and how they've evolved. And so what I would say is that the broader review of some of our harvest measures for intertidal shellfish have been few and far between, and I think that's the nub of the problem, is that we have not had regular reviews by Fisheries New Zealand, and there's a need to ensure that the management response keeps up with the level of interest in terms of the harvest that is going on, and so that's been one of the nubs of the problem, I think. And what we've seen is, of course, that there have been some tools in the Fisheries Act that enable some level of local intervention, and that has occurred in terms of some of the management tools that have been applied for, such as temporary closures across the Auckland region, and that's been going on for some years, and I've got a table that lists some of those things out so you can see the background to that. And apart from the infrequent review of some of these management measures, I've also highlighted there that Fisheries New Zealand staff levels are very low relative to the level of fishery resources in the Auckland area, or the Upper North Island for the area that they're responsible for. And so we've been advocating as staff to Fisheries New Zealand to make sure that this is on their radar and that it is actually something that does need some prioritisation. We've been hearing for years that this is of concern to the communities across Auckland and Coromandel and elsewhere, and so we've been advocating for this review, and it has now come about. So it's only a matter of months before this review will be released. As I said at the start, the review is likely to focus on this particular category of shellfish that is included in the regulations under this label called all other shellfish, and they're mainly species that are found on the hard shore, but not only. There are some that are on the soft shore as well. Now, just to give you a bit of an indication of how things have gone over the years, back in '93, when I was with Fisheries, we introduced the national combined daily limit of 50 per person of shellfish that are not individually prescribed with their own limit. And so at the time, that was in response to the same issues that we're kind of really facing now, is that there's concerns about the level of harvest that is occurring around the coastline, and that these species at that time didn't have any regulation at all in terms of how much people could take. We then started to see some closures come along in particular locations, again mainly soft shore species like cockles and pippies. So in the case of Cheltenham, that was mainly around the status of cockles. In Karikari, it was a mix of species, both the sandy shore beach plus also the reefs on the headlands adjacent to it. Eastern Beach, it was a broader shellfish prohibition, again mainly on the soft shore, but they did have some hard shore structures with some shellfish species there. Umapuya is well known for the cockle bed there, and there's obviously been a temporary closure that's been rolled across every 2 years on that particular site. Cockle Bay, that's slightly different. They started out with a seasonal closure in place for about 7 months in the year, and they did that for several years, between October 2008 through to May 2021. And then from May 2021 onwards, it's been a full prohibition for shellfish collection at Cockle Bay. Whangateao, slightly different again, mainly focused on cockles and pippies, but in this case, the closure was for 3 years. It was then reviewed, put in place for another 3 years, and then in March 2016, it was put on with an indefinite date. In Whangateao, the concern here was the pathogens that were present in the water column that led to a 50% die-off of cockles and pippies within the Whangateao harbour. So the range of factors that are responsible for some of the declines in some of these species is not always harvest, pressure, could be pathogens, or it could be things like sedimentation, which is a key issue for Auckland Council to be conscious of. Waiheke Island, obviously, more recently, that's more recent history in the sense of this 4 species that were wanted to be focused on. That's a temporary closure, which is due to expire. The next round is August 26th. And then the last one I've got there, which is probably one of the most important ones, is that back in '98, reduced bag limits were applied to the commonly harvested species of shellfish across the Auckland Coromandel area, which includes the west coast of Auckland all the way through to Homanga Point on the east coast of Coromandel. So I guess the management responses here show a mix of different tools that can be used. You can have bag limits, you can have spatial closures, and then they could be at a local level, as has been the case, and also you can have reduced bag limits across a more generic level as well for some other species. So there's not necessarily one right answer for which management option needs to be applied looking ahead, but what we need to do is assess all the different management options and ask the question, what is appropriate for where we are now in terms of the level of harvest of shellfish species, particularly the all other category species. So as I said, the review is likely to look at this all other shellfish species category and ask the question, how do we address some of the sustainability issues that have been observed with these species? One option is that you look to reduce the daily limit. It's a combined daily limit, just to be clear, that when we say 50 per person, it's not 50 starfish, 50 crabs, 50 whelks, 50, it's actually 50 for all of those things that don't have any limit. So it's also about making sure that that limit is sustainable for that broader range of species that are included within that all others category. Just for argument's sake, I've just put up there from 50 to 25, so you could look to reduce the bag limits by half, let's say. The other option, which I think we're much more likely to be needing to pursue, is some broader-based geographic interventions. And what we've suggested here relates to things like seasonal closures. So we've talked about the possibility of, or we've seen Fisheries New Zealand apply a seasonal closure in the case of some of the beaches around Auckland, but it may be that it's appropriate across a much broader area, like the whole of Auckland Coromandel area, to look at a restriction on harvesting by season, and that could be 6-month closure, 9-month closure, or whatever level of closure you think is appropriate. And then there's another option, which is a full closure. So you could look at basically just saying that we've reached a stage where the harvest of these species is probably not seen as sustainable, and there's a number of different factors that are influencing the success or the viability of those species, both harvesting and non-harvesting activity. So for example, impacts of sediment runoff and or climate change. So there will be a need to look at all these different options and consider them when the proposals come out. My inkling is that the proposals that, or the options that you see on the screen, on your screen here, will be included in the discussion document that's due out in a couple of months. Next steps is to make sure that whatever the proposals are, is that we basically have a look at what is going to be the most effective and efficient way to address the underlying issues for ensuring sustainable shellfish use in the Auckland region for the all category species, all shellfish category. And we'll be looking to seek insights from local boards to advise or make that aware to you as the committee. We've already received, as a result of the information memo we put out a couple of weeks ago, 22nd of January, some indication from about half a dozen local boards that they're keen to be involved in that discussion process. and I suspect they are quite keen to see a significant level of restriction on any harvest. I would say probably more to the edge of the full closure option. So that's something we all just need to take on board. One of the things that we just need to be very conscious of is that if we have a patchwork of different spatial closures, that is only going to displace fishing activity from one area to another, which is why I'm quite keen to ensure that we look at a more generic-based approach across the Auckland Coromandel region, which is what we proposed back in '98 when I was in fisheries, is that we were actually worried at that time at a macro scale of Aucklanders racing off to their batch and the Coromandel and harvesting down there. So this is something that we're considering in our discussions with Fisheries New Zealand about what is the most effective way to do this. At the same time, they're concerned about a legitimate harvest that parts of our communities would like to take. What we need to ask is, regardless of who it is that's harvesting, because that's irrelevant, but the question is, what is an appropriate level of harvest for those species? And we have many cases of different types of shellfish that have been harvested over the years that a local community may have over-harvested just simply because they're right next to the local shellfish bed. And in this case, people are mobile, they do travel, and so we just need to say, what is the appropriate set of management controls that we need to bring into place to address the fundamental issue, which is sustaining shellfish resources into the future. So effectively, that's a bit of an overview, and what I just wanted to just highlight is that the committee resolution here today is simply to seek your agreement to us preparing a submission, to bring that back to the committee if our meeting dates align with the closing date for submissions, and if that does not happen, that we've got delegated authority in place for the chair, deputy chair and a Hokora member to sign off on the submission. I guess we'll endeavour to obviously, have been articulating to Fisheries New Zealand to make sure that the consultation period is reasonable, maybe 6 weeks if we're lucky, and that will hopefully give us the opportunity to come back to the committee and offer you a proposed submission that you would like to endorse. I think that's probably all I needed to say at this point. Needless to say, this is something that is a hotbed issue for people, and we just need to work through all those views and ensure that we provide a council submission that will advocate for the sustainability of these fisheries in the longer term, which is, I think, also part of the Chair's rec in terms of acknowledging that particular endpoint, and that's consistent with the Council's position on ensuring that these species are sustained into the future. Richard.
Cool. Kia ora, Dave. Thank you. And you're a wealth of knowledge on this subject. I'll just put up the resolutions. Myself and Alf moved in second. I've just added, obviously we don't know the full proposal, but I thought it was important to, if this officers are going to be finding out and looking for the evidence, because they'll have to build evidence to help our case. So confirm, just added a B in the middle there, confirm that the Council's general position is to support more conservative harvest restrictions to ensure sustainability of intertidal shellfish species. Obviously, when the submission comes back, we may want to be more prescriptive on certain parts of the coast or certain species, etc., but the general thrust the staff will be working on, I'm keen for B to be quite clear. But we will need, obviously, advice from local boards, mana whenua, wider community as well. Right, Councillor Short, you have a question?
Sorry. Obviously, I think you're aware of all the unsustainable harvesting that's happening up on Whangaparaoa. And obviously, there's a lot of concern from our community in regards to it. And I think a couple of weeks ago, there was a bit of a protest, and a few of our councillors, along with their very cool scooter, Greg Sayers, I'm looking at you, popped along, who supported the community and their calls for, protection. But anyway, getting to the point, I think Ngāti Manuhiri have been massive players and instrumental in obviously applying for the rāhui that they've put in. How does this work with that?
Yes, so The Minister is due to make a decision on that application this month, February. It's one of the things about where you apply spatial tools, and in the case of that particular tool, it's a temporary closure, and what we're looking at here is possibly a broader ranging, more durable situation. We will be obviously doing that in conjunction with the local boards to get some of their feedback. I'm not surprised if certain boards in Manawhina will be interested in making sure that we go for a more durable option. I think the risk I'm highlighting here is that if you just go with a patchwork, it doesn't necessarily give you a complete picture of what you should be doing across the Auckland region. If this the ministerial decision was made, that's fine. It's just you just bring that into the fabric of what you're dealing with, and there's a bunch of complementary tools that we'll be looking at here. So if there's some further temporary closures that happen to be added around the Auckland region, that's fine. We're trying to look at what is the baseline for the whole region.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Mayor Brown.
Okay, I generally support what you're doing, but there are a couple of things. One thing that's not being harvested enough is kinna, and it is a shellfish. It is a shell. I don't know if you picked it up, but and there's kinna barrens where there's nothing but bloody kinna, and so it's, in order to protect some of the other stuff, we need to over-harvest those. So I think that needs to be fitted in there somehow or other in some form of comment, if it's possible. And then the other thing is that I get your point about people crossing boundaries if you just have one. And so I think you should work with the Northland Regional Council if you can. There's a company here that sends buses full of people from a particular country up north to Urutiti Beach because there's a specific type of item there that no one else would eat, but they do. And there's none of it left. And it's just, and so, broad, talk to the neighbours as well. Otherwise, we'll just have what you're saying, one beach and they go to the next one. But I'd like to see kinna in there somewhere or other because, if these people aren't wanting to harvest something, that's a good thing to harvest. They're just taken over as kinna barrens there. If you haven't dived in there to look, it's quite surprising, really. It'll give if you don't clean them up, there'll be no seaweed left either. So. Is that okay? That was my point. Thank you.
Yes. So firstly, kinna has got an individual bag limit, so it's not covered by the all others category. And the second point is that last year the minister increased the bag limit 3 times from 50 per person to I think 150. So to enable people to harvest it. So that's already catered for. And then your comment about your neighbour, the neighbours more generally, is that yes, that's partly why we have a Auckland Coromandel construct back in 1993 or 98. But equally, we will be thinking about the northern side of our boundary as well, in terms of what might be affected there. So yeah, we'll cover that off.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Mayor. Next up, Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Chair. A few questions. I think you made the paper even clearer, Dave, so thanks for that. So in terms, it's around sustainability. So we're focusing on that all other species, which I understand that's to be most important in my mind. That includes the rock pools in that intertidal area. So not the sandy beaches where you get pippies and scallops and everything else. We're talking about that actual hard rock area, and the sustainability of those life forms there. You could look at a certain area. So I was down at that Army Bay where it's been stripped and it's happening in Muriwai, but there's other areas that probably aren't being. So, and you want to look at the whole region solution. So what data do we have? And the Chair talked about trying to get some evidence together, but what data do we have and how much of it do we have about how sustainable regionally that rock pool life is across Auckland? That's my first question, and then another couple, Richard.
So one of the challenges for Fisheries New Zealand is trying to provide evidence-based proposals, and one of the challenges for people in this sort of space is that often we don't have sufficient evidence to say, like in a hard scientific way, that there is a problem. And so this is where we have to sort of use our eyes and ears a little bit and sort of just sort of think about some of the trends we've seen, and some of the observations we've seen over the years, over a longer time period, to say, well, they used to be able to go and collect power on the Devonport coast back in the 50s. Well, you don't do that now. There's a lot of history that we can refer to, and this is what we sometimes call anecdotal, and it's sometimes not seen as high quality information by Fisheries New Zealand. But if you have a lot of observations from the community and some quite strong anecdotes that can get us to a certain way. The other comment I make is that from the council's perspective, they've got a State of the Environment Report research program, which looks at hardshore status, and they've got a number of sites around the region, which is sort of looking at how hardshore species are going. And they're indicating some declines, some concerns. They point to the 2023 storms, which put sediment all out onto these reefs on the low to mid reef level and cause some problems there, stress. You've got low oxygen levels in some environments sometimes. So we can point to a number of things in terms of our environmental monitoring program more generally that show that these stresses are not necessarily going to go away. So it's about thinking about the future as well. So I think we can bring a range of different quality of information together to justify further restrictions. I think it's really a case of how far we go, and so it'll be interesting to sort of see that dynamic, because there will be places around Auckland region where some of the shellfish resources in the hardshore may be okay, and they could sustain some fishing activity, but maybe not at some of the control levels that we've got in place under the fisheries regulations at the moment. So I think it's about saying, well, maybe we can be precautionary in that space and enable some harvest to continue, but not at the current permitted levels. That's going to be a bit of a test to work through as we gather people's insights.
So that's helpful. That's probably a nice segue into my next question. That's in terms of gathering that knowledge. So the public will have, assuming here, the public will have a chance to make submissions. Auckland Council will have a chance to make submissions. Do the public make those submissions directly to fisheries, or do they come to us so we digest and then we make our own based on their submissions, or do we make our own and the public make their own separately from any overlap? So i.e. us seeing any of that helpful history?
Yeah, so submissions will go direct to Fisheries New Zealand as the management agency seeking input. It may be that if some of those views are known to council staff, if they're brought to the council staff's attention before we bring a report to the committee, that will be helpful. But equally, we'll be going to our local boards and just getting insights from them as well, and they'll no doubt have their finger on the pulse for some of the community interests, and of course we'll be engaging with mana whenua as well in terms of just getting their insights.
So, and just in terms of that B up there, so it says that we're probably supportive of more conservative harvest restrictions, okay, but it could potentially, I'm wondering if, is that, Mr. Chair, I wonder if that gives us enough scope, and just be interested in the officers thinking there, because you might want to be more conservative about some of the shellfish, okay, you might want to halve the limits on some of those or whatever it might be, but you might want to ban, you touched on this in your presentation, perhaps around the rock pools, or have it seasonal or something like that. So have we got enough scope in there?
Yes, I'm comfortable that recommendation, as the chair had noted, is broad enough to encompass where we need to go and give staff enough direction in terms of what might be the appropriate mixture of measures to pursue with a council submission.
I think it'd be fair to say in that feedback, you may well find if it's going to fisheries or some of it's alerted to officers, Auckland Council officers, that in those areas that have been particularly heavily harvested, there's a lot of deep concern in those communities about the survivability and the recovery of those areas. So they'll be thinking ban, right? That's what they'll be thinking. But if you just ban in one area, or you're saying there's potential, all you're doing is pushing it perhaps onto another beach area. So okay, that's good. And then I'm sure we can find a positive solution here going forward. And so I thank you, Chair, for bringing this up early with us. And finally, I think I know the answer to this, Dave, and that's in terms of, obviously, a lot of this is dependent on fisheries. Is there anything in the armament of Auckland Council's range of tools that we have, is there anything that we can do to help support any actions in terms of increasing the sustainability of the life in those rock pools, or are we totally dependent on fisheries?
I think the key thing here is under our resource management responsibilities, we should be thinking about, how we're managing some of those discharges to the receiving environment and asking how we're, the stresses that they cause is really the key issue for the council to be conscious of. The other thing we can do, if we've got things like park rangers, they can be a little bit like eyes and ears of some of the harvesting that goes on, so we can at least be a point of contact. And so there is some ways that council staff could help in trying to educate maybe some of the harvesters. So there is possible ways that we can get alongside Fisheries New Zealand and how we entertain signage at beaches and in terms of any controls we have on how signage is done. We might be more willing to ensure that signage is appropriate, that helps Fisheries New Zealand get their messages out. So there are a couple of options for us to help indirectly, perhaps. So yeah, just a couple of things to think about there.
I don't know if this is also helpful. I'll try and make it a question, and that's helpful what you've talked about, the signage, etc. But some local boards also invest some of their discretionary spending into wardens. So people that might go around and educate people, which you've just touched on. Were you aware that some of the local boards have that type of resource that we might be able to tap into potentially moving forward?
Historically, park rangers have held honorary fishery officer warrants under the Fisheries Act, and so there is the possibility for some staff with the right level of training and what have you to help facilitate that end. There is quite a few health and safety issues to be mindful of as someone who's in an enforcement role, but there is a possibility that they are Johnny on the spot, which might be quite helpful even just as a contact point. So there are ways, but I think it just needs to be carefully handled and worked through. So I think the other point, Chair, just to generally say is that one of the other things that we want to flag is that there needs to be better monitoring of an evaluation of the measures that are actually introduced over time, because otherwise you end up with something we introduced back in '93 and nothing's happened in terms of changes. So we need to have more regular reviews. So just a bit of a segue there to Councillor Sayers' point about some of the ancillary activity that we could do to support Fisheries New Zealand, like our surveying of beaches. That's another way we can actually support information coming in. So there's a number of things we can do to more indirect, but I think they will be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Gillen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. This is a really important issue, it's particularly at the moment. Just following on from Councillor Sayers, so the signage is not within our jurisdiction at all, and the monitoring and the enforcement really isn't within our jurisdiction. Even where it's part of a park, like the actual land parcel goes down past there.
I think I'd probably defer on this one, but I think we have a role, obviously, where signage is on council land or road verges or things like that in terms of our role in approving placement of signages, if that's where you're coming from.
I'm just thinking a lot of the signage at the moment is quite deficient. It's not multilingual. It's not clear. But if that's fisheries signage, are we allowed to put it up, council branded signage like that, or do we have to wait for them to come and do that?
I think it would be a case of just how they prioritise the sites that they put signage in and what level of funding they might have to do that. I think there are things that council could advocate for in terms of seeing increased signage. So I think there's some opportunity there, but I think one of the biggest problems they have, I think, is with vandalism of signs as well, and so they, can only put up so many signs in their budgets. But there may be opportunities there for council to assist with making it easy for them to get signage in place. I think that's probably more the key issue.
Okay, it'd be good to look at this because we really should have a sign at every beach with clear guidelines as to what is allowed and what isn't allowed. Now, just regarding the actual process here, so the ministry's having the review. You had your table up there before of the bans that are currently in place or restrictions. If we advocate for more restrictions, does it automatically go in there, or we need them to approve that and then put it into the legislation? I mean, what's the process? What's the timeline? When will it be implemented? That kind of thing.
So currently the Fisheries New Zealand have advised that they will be releasing their proposals before April. There'll be potentially a 6-week window for public feedback. Hopefully the council will get a submission in that 6-week window, and then it would be evaluated. The minister would make a call on whether or not, what option A, B or C is put in place through a regulation, and there'll be a regulatory change which would probably see us through to probably 4 months out, so from the close of submission. So it could be before next summer you would have new restrictions in place.
And it's not a schedule that can be altered at any time as needed.
Unlikely at this. The tool they use, I think, is through the Gazette notice, so it gives more flexibility for making changes in the future. The trick will be is that they are required by law to consult widely on their proposals, and so they have to develop any new proposals, possibly get ministerial agreement to release such proposals, and then come out with them. I think just in terms of the time frame issue more generally, what I would highlight is that I think we would want to indicate that with any new controls that are put in place, that there is some evaluation steps that Fisheries New Zealand will take on the success or otherwise of those measures within a 3-year window, let's say, as opposed to what we have now, which is that they just don't have the resources to do any of that sort of assessment at a specific level.
Okay, and my last question is, what if the rock pools are on private land? And I'm thinking of places like Takapuna Beach where big chunks of it are actually on private parcel that extends out into the water. I assume this is because there's legislation, this covers all of that as well, or is there a difference there?
No, that's correct. That fishery resources across New Zealand encompass, regardless of land tenure, the rules apply across the board.
Kia ora, Councillor. Hokura Member Wilson.
Crikey, you've been here as long as we have today. Look, a couple of questions. It's very handy that you do have the fisheries background. I guess you did indicate the consultation, you said hopefully 6 weeks, and I'm hoping that is the case in terms of mana whenua and the customary fishing and harvesting that's incumbent, which includes your ability to be a fisheries officer warden as being spoken here. So I'm hoping that when it does come and the submission is decided, that there is some emphasis and clearly timing, if that is required by each of the individual mana whenua, that will be tested in that sense, because clearly the reason why they have those roles and responsibilities is because it is hugely significant. You don't know what you don't know, but I guess I'm just making sure depending on what happens here, that is a key component of any engagement. In terms of the engagement, is there a sense that fisheries themselves will undertake, well, they're the ones that are putting the bill out, aren't they? And normally it's heavily reliant on Auckland Council. Do you get a sense that there will be a component that they will undertake that consultation, which may cut down the ability for Auckland Council if they put a submission to do the same. So I'm going to wrap it up all in one, so I'm not asking you, so I know you can keep it in your head sufficiently well. Now, that aside, I'm just thinking about the resource that council will require to be able to reach the local communities and specifically mana whenua and what that will enable, and especially around Rahui and the like. So it's a bit of a test of you remember all the pātai, if that's okay, Dave.
Kia ora. Yes, firstly, Fisheries New Zealand has undertaken some level of engagement last year on the forthcoming review with mana whenua. I'm not sure of the extent of that in terms of how many iwi they talked to, but they did say that they had gone to some of their forums that they have in place and sort of start to engage with some of the kaitiaki for the interaction between Fisheries New Zealand and mana whenua. There's no reason why we couldn't, as a council, as staff, go out to mana whenua with an email tomorrow saying, just so you know, that there's a forthcoming Fisheries New Zealand review, which will, look to review some of these shellfish controls to give them a bit of a heads up. And then, of course, when we get the proposals, we're happy to sort of make sure that they're aware of that and the opportunity for them to let their views be known to us in addition to going directly to Fisheries New Zealand. So there's a couple of opportunities we can actually help with making sure that people are aware of how this review might affect their interests. And I guess the key comment to make here is that this is focused on recreational fishing activity and not the customary fishing activity. So we can certainly do things to make that sure that mana whenua are aware of this.
Okay, just thank you very much. You've answered all of those as one. So it is, I suppose, the in-house specialist advice that exists currently through yourself and others is key for some that don't have that. So it's just trying to, and not putting you on the spot there, make sure that that could be available as well if it's not available in terms of mana whenua who have a specific role around these matters. That's all I'm posing it as a question more than anything else.
So just generally, we will be, I'll pull together the relevant people I need to help with engagement and making sure we get the key feedback we need.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Member Wilson. Councillor Filipaina.
Tēnā koe he mana. Kia ora, Dave. Dave, I just got one pātai, and it's in regards to 1, 4 and 13, and it relates to timeframes that do not allow for its consideration. That's number 1. Number 4, there is uncertainty around the time period that will be provided for feedback. And number 13, it's around anticipated to occur at either the April or May 2026 committee meeting. Can you assure us that a draft, depending on the times and the feedback times from Fisheries New Zealand, will be sent to us for our feedback? And I mean, if it doesn't get to the 2 meetings because of our calendar timeframes, we have the opportunity of giving feedback before it is given to the chair, deputy chair and hokura member. Can I just be reassured that that's going to happen?
Yeah, look, I've stressed with Fisheries New Zealand that we have these timeframes which need a bit of consideration from a council perspective, but I'm also happy to ensure that we circulate a draft to committee members outside of a normal committee thing. If we can't meet these meeting deadlines, I'm happy to circulate a draft to members of the committee just to get any insights as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm losing my voice, sorry. Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to ask about B. I would support more extensive harvest restrictions as opposed to conservative harvest restrictions. Am I reading that right? That's saying our harvest restrictions be conservative, so limited.
Yeah, it's the same. We're looking at more restrictive measures to basically limit what people can take.
So yeah,
Oh,
I think Dave and I discussed this, and liberal harvest restrictions would mean our restrictions are quite wide, whereas in this case, although I understand what you mean, it sounds like we're making the controls less extreme or more conservative, but what we're saying is that we're making it more conservative, as in allowing people to take less rather than more.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I would support the ban or banning, more enforcement in our submission to fisheries. Yeah, and yeah, enforcement and just signage has a role to play in terms of if it helps enforcement, but I really think it's gone past the stage of education and to the point of really you need strong enforcement. So I hope that can be reflected in what we give back to Fisheries New Zealand and for them to use social media, because that's how they're getting en masse people turning up and stripping the seashore, whatever.
So we do have infringement notices under the Fisheries Act, $250 for harvests that are twice the daily limit, up to 3 times the daily limit. $500 infringement notice if it's it's $500, but if it's more than twice but less than 3 times the daily limit, it's $250 if it's up to 2 times the daily limit. And if you exceed that again, you go to court. So there are good measures there that are efficient in terms of infringement notices. But I've seen some cases where some harvesters have been hit with $4,000 fines through courts. So, there are some deterrents. I think the issue that you're picking up on, though, is the lack of compliance staff. There's only about 16 staff, 18 staff, maybe across the Auckland region. I would have to confirm that with Fisheries New Zealand, but that's in terms of full-time fishery officers. And then they rely very heavily on honorary fishery officers for the recreational enforcement activities. And that's sort of, difficult to maintain a number of people over the years. But in signage, they do signage, but they are actually now moving into social media more. They do multilingual signs. We did that back in the 90s, so it's always been there. But I think it's more about how much, and like if it could be done more, then, and that's something we can include to say that we need to see more of that level of support.
Yeah, I would support that because looking at TikTok, you've got just people that are there. They don't seem like they're warranted fisheries officers or anything, but they're calling, they're going up and telling people stop taking so much, and you can see so many issues coming out of that where they could be putting themselves at risk in trying to do enforcement. So enforcement is a massive gap. Monitoring is a massive gap. People on the ground is a massive gap. So it'd be good to reflect that in our feedback.
Thank you, Councillor. Don't think there are any more questions. Cool. I guess my one question can we put more factors about the resources into our submissions? So yes, it might be about the controls that come out or the changes that fisheries propose, but things like signage, things like resource, if they are going to have far greater restrictions, which we support, how will that be policed? Can it be part of the work done? I know that you have got the data of people, the infringements that have been found, but actually some of the issue might be there's too many people taking the limit, which is the issue too. So it's kind of how we deal with that is different.
Yes, so I'll be encouraging Fisheries New Zealand to perhaps release some of that information with their proposals, actually. But equally, we can, have a hunt round in terms of what information we have to help support the council's position on any additional actions that are needed beyond just the management settings.
And do we think, like the proposal pre-Christmas was definitely around the intertidal, do you think it'll come out broader? Obviously, we still have issues with bottom trawling and other things that aren't as easily seen as people taking from the beach foreshore. Will that sort of thing come back up through this, or is it going to be specific on intertidal shellfish?
It's going to be targeted to the intertidal shellfish review. Any one of those other topics that in fisheries just takes a whole lot of time and effort in its own right. And so my advice to Fisheries New Zealand has been, don't actually extend to other shellfish issues, just focus on this one to do with the all others bag limit and where harvesting is allowed, because that in itself is a very focused issue for people to offer their views on, and we want clarity from the public as well as others to recommend revised settings.
Cool. Thank you very much. Right, we'll get you to retire, Dave. Thank you. And we have the resolutions on the screen. I think Councillor Watson would like to speak.
Yeah, just a couple of words. A good report, Dave. I generally support the direction of travel there. I guess from my perspective, what maybe hasn't emerged quite as clearly as it could have is the extent to what has transpired over the last 23 years, where where that original limit of 50 existed. We now have, certainly in the part of the area I live in, is pretty much a systematic plundering of the rock pool. So it's on a basis. It's almost like a military operation. So you can have 100 people come in. They work their way through each of the pools. They've got chisels. They've got piano wire, and they just strip everything bare. And it's very clear that this is organised. So as much as Whangaparāoa Peninsula has got really hit, there's other areas where it's extended to as well, and there's even the anecdotal evidence that it's other parts of New Zealand where there's busloads going down from Auckland to other tidal areas in New Zealand and stripping them. So it's on a scale that I'm certainly have never seen before. It's devastating, and what has been particularly gratifying, I think, has been the response of local communities who have actually led the countercharge to this. So we have had people in increasing numbers, and I think there was a good turnout at the protest meeting, including two of the councillors from Rodney and North Shore, that people have really seen that this threatens the sustainability of these rock pools as kind of as far as living organisms go. So Dave has taken us through the suite of options here, from a reduced limit, a seasonal restriction, perhaps a complete ban, and then an evaluation of what's happening. I think everything needs to be on the table. If anything, we're kind of understating the problem as far as I can see. But having said that, the options have been articulated that I think would be effective, a combination of them all. And I think the last one, monitoring, is really important, because if we're not actually looking at what's happening, we don't know how bad the situation is and what needs to be done. So ongoing monitoring is really important, because it's actually been the members of the public who have brought that to our attention, essentially. In that respect, probably a couple of acknowledgements are due. Certainly one gentleman, Mark Lenton, who has been leading the charge on Protect Whangaparāoa rock pools, but has also been acting as a conduit for other parts of Auckland, Piha, Muriwai as well, and down in the East Coast Bays. Mark's been magnificent. Have to give a shout out to Ngāti Manuhiri Settlement Trust, who stepped up to the mark as far as actually doing something goes when no one else was taking too much of an interest, and to the Hauraki Golf Forum, who were very supportive of the issue that was raised and any potential kind of response. So Dave's taken us through this. It's a reasonably thorough job, and I hope we err on the side of proactivity and sustainability, that we don't understate things, because they've got worse, and they've got worse a lot quicker over the last 12 months. There is also mention there of honorary fishery officers. What we're finding up on Whangaparoa is that there seems to be no shortage of people willing to step up to the plate and go out and do some volunteering in an honorary capacity, which actually is a bit of a throwback to the 1960s and 70s, where they had beach wardens for all manner of things that seem to result in a degree of compliance and good behaviour that maybe hasn't been duplicated since. But one thing that does definitely put people off as far as honorary fisheries officers goes, that they've got to do 80 hours of training, 80, before they've even started. Jeepers creepers. That's like, you know, for 2 40-hour weeks. That's over the top. So I don't know. I think some councillors in the past have brought up, you know, this notion of trying to encourage people and giving them, you know, honorary positions. I think that's something we should look at too, because of the compliance is just under too much strain, whether it's our council people or the fisheries. You know, they're hopelessly ill-equipped in terms of numbers to deal with everything over the Auckland region. So if we've got people in the community that are willing to come up and you know, help this, and the people I've seen have been very good, you know, mannerly. They've, you know, I think anyone knows these days you have to watch how you approach people. They're not confrontational, they're educational. But having said that, there is, in the stripping of the rock pools, it's very clear there's just a certain number of people now who just don't give a toss. They don't care. So there are people who are open to education, but there are other people who aren't. So I'll just finish by saying that there's been a lot of work done. There's been a huge response from various communities around Auckland, particularly the one up in Whangaparoa. So I think this kind of dual approach with much appreciated intervention of iwi where required, and certainly as has happened with Ngāti Manuhiri, is really valuable for a really speedy, timely response. But we are facing almost an existential threat in some parts of Auckland in terms of the rock pools and the life forms that are in them. So, you know, it's our duty there to really stand up for that, and I'm hoping this submission process will give us the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you very much. And I'll just finish up briefly by saying that it's really important that we take a stand, but it's also a good reminder that this isn't about specific community. Overfishing is killing the Gulf. Crayfish are almost extinct across the Hauraki Gulf. I think snapper and trevally and others are down about 80%. And then you've got bottom trawling, and unfortunately the minister allowing commercial fishing within high protected areas. So, you know, this is an issue, but it's an overall issue. I think it was disappointing to hear some of the minister's comments about immigration and things, where this is about fish limits and laws and resources around that. And we've got issues from all parts of our community about overfishing of different species, bottom trawling, etc. So this is one part of that overall problem that we all have to face up to. And I think when we know what the proposal is, we'll be even stronger, as Councillor Watson says, through that. So thank you very much. All those in favour? Any opposed? No? Okay, the next item I'm happy to move. Councillor Ferry, second. Any questions on that? Status update of actions and decisions? I think so. All those in favour? Aye. I have Councillor Filipaina move. Councillor Henderson second. Summary of confidential decisions and related information. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? 8.7, summary of information memo circulated to the committee. A mover, Councillor Short. Seconder, Councillor Filipaina. All those in favour? Aye. Aye. Sorry. Ka whakaria te tapu ki a wātea ai te ara, ke tūruki whakataha ai, ke tūruki whakataha ai, homie huie tai kia. We finished just after the 3 o'clock that I thought we might get to. But kia ora everyone, thanks very much for today, and we will see you tomorrow, I guess, or sometime. Kia ora.